That works for me. Okay. All right. We got Bob Thurnhoffer here from Louisville.
Mhm.
Louisville, if I'm saying
Oh,
it right.
the way I've gathered is you pronounce it as oh.
That tracks. I'm sure people in Kentucky are going to appreciate that.
Yeah, no one from Kentucky is gonna watch this. It's just gonna be a bunch of like old timers from Glenbard East High School and Slumbard, Illinois. Those are the people that are gonna watch this.
Uh, yeah, well, because you brought it up, now I have to go into this. I made that comment on social media about the best coaches coming from Lombard. Our guy Eric Brechtel immediately hit me back with like, yeah, but so did the Unabomber. So,
Hey, that was Des Plaines, not Lombard.
He
oh,
was in no, he was in Lombard for like 9 months.
Oh,
Yeah, he had like a short stint. I hope hopefully it was a good experience for him. It's not the cause of of what ultimately became of him, but it is true that he did spend some portion of his life in Lombard.
yeah. So explosive things out of Lombard.
Yeah.
man. Oh. All right. Well, we'll edit this part out.
Yeah.
Good start. I like it.
Yeah,
Yeah. We're
exactly.
didn't want controversy. Don't invite the king. All right. All right. Bob, can you just kind of start with telling us how you ended up where you're at and however long or short you want to make that story, give us
Yeah.
from Lombard to Louisville.
Yeah. Ooh, that could be a couple hours in and of itself. So I'll try to keep it somewhat short. But yeah, no, it's just I guess like yeah, being I was like one of the very few kids, maybe the only kid in America that was an 11-year-old in his backyard pretending to be Mike Powell and Carl Lewis. Of course I was a Bulls fan and I wanted to be Jordan and Pippen, but most kids are focusing on NBA, NFL, where I was like the only kid that was focusing on professional long jumpers, like and so watching the 92 Olympics, it just always like that was like always a defining time for me as an 11-year-old kid. Just, seeing the Olympics, specifically the long jump, and that just like fascinated me what a human being could do. I just like the idea of like trying to maximize human potential. How fast can you run? How far can you jump? How high can you jump? Those types of things above like playing a team game, that just I found it so interesting. And I never really knew anything about track and field or Olympic sports or individual sports like that. I only knew NFL, NBA, MLB, and NHL. That was, I'm a Chicago kid, so that's all I knew. And so when I saw the 92 Olympics, that sort of like expanded my understanding of sports and just like human potential and what a human can achieve. And so yeah, like I think that's always what I think back to when people ask me about like my coaching journey or whatnot. It always started as a kid. I was like the only kid that was obsessed with long jumpers instead of NBA players, and so yeah, I would say that's where it started because then I always just had a fascination with athletic development and what a human being can perform, and so that's kind of where it started. I didn't end up doing track in middle school, but I did go out for the track team in high school at good old Glenbard East, baby.
Nice.
Slumbard, Illinois, as they call it. We
Red
were
Red Raiders?
terrible. The Rams.
Rams. That's right.
Rams. Yep. Black and red. So
Yeah.
it's going to be black and red again.
Yeah.
Again, it feels right. So, um, yeah. So I did high school track. I was totally mediocre. I never made it to state. I was solid. Like I placed at the DuPage Valley Conference meet several times. I think the best finish I had at sectionals was fifth at York High School, my senior year. Um, and so I was never a stud. Definitely no scholarship offers or anything. And I had to pay for school myself, being raised by a single mom. And so I went to College of DuPage, COD. And so yeah, I just walked on to the track team there and worked really hard, improved like gosh, 5, 6 feet in the triple jump. And that got me a scholarship to UIC, University of Illinois at Chicago with Canadal there. And so yeah, it was good. I mean, just I majored in exercise science, and so I took classes on biomechanics and training theory, exercise physiology. I did anatomy 1 and anatomy 2. We had cadavers, so that it doesn't seem like they do that a whole lot these days anymore. And so I was just really, really like it was yeah, my time at UIC, I didn't really improve a whole lot athletically there, but because we didn't have a jumps coach, I just kind of was like training myself basically. And I think I was like training myself for the most part. I kind of had a little bit of guidance from Canadal and Coach Holloway, but they weren't jumps coaches. And then I was like it was like my first foray into studying all things exercise science. And so I was my studying was going out through the roof, and then I kept like having all these ideas and all these things I wanted to try. And so when I be like training and in the FAC or the PEB, I would just be like trying things endlessly. And I think I probably could have been quite a lot better. It's just that I had no structure to what I was doing. I was just like, I'm going to try this bonding activity. I'm going to try this lift. I'm going to try this sprint. I'm going to try. And I could never like settle in on like a program because I just had all these ideas coming at me all the time. But still, it was a really like fruitful time for me, just in terms of learning. And then, yeah, once I graduated, Canadal knew how intensely interested I was in exercise science and coaching and track and field in general, or just athletic development in general. And so he asked me to join the coaching staff as just like a part-time coach in it'd be fall of 2004. And so that was when I started coaching. I'd show up every day, even I wasn't required to, but I was excited to be in coaching, and I only coached like I don't know, maybe 6, 7 jumpers. I did only long and triple, and then I sort of helped out with the high jump. There was a high jump coach there by the name of Garvin, who was really, really good. And so like he kind of became a good friend of mine, and he came to my wedding and all. And so like I kind of learned some high jump from Garvin, and I would help him out with the high jumpers as well. And so yeah, I did that for several years. And then I kind of had a bit of like a quarter life crisis. Not sure if I wanted to go down the coaching route or what kind of opportunities were really there. And then I was getting like really interested in theology and philosophy, and I love teaching. And so I was thinking about maybe I'd go in the teaching route, like at the university level. And so I did grad school for a year in theology. But I had like a bit of a conflict with some of the professors at it when I was in that program. And I got in some arguments over some of the material we were studying in systematic theology too. And it sort of like steered me away from theology, and I gravitated towards philosophy. And so that's when long story short, ended up at Loyola University Chicago in the master's program of philosophy, and also got a grad assistant position with the track team there. So it really worked out great. So I was in 2010, I started at Loyola in the Masters of Arts in Philosophy, and being the grad assistant with the track team. And I was coaching. I really didn't coach anything that first semester. I was just kind of a sidekick holding a clipboard for the other coaches. So I didn't really do any coaching. I kind of started to coach by the end. The head coach kind of saw that I probably should be more involved, and so he kind of put me to be more involved with a few of the jumpers. They didn't really only had like 3 jumpers there. Um, and then once he saw that I was like doing at least like pretty good with the team, he kept me on as a GA because they were bringing in he didn't even tell me he had signed a kid from Great Britain, James McLaughlin. But there was really like no jumps coach for James. There was just the sprints coach who sort of like did the jumps. And so the head coach there, Rick Wimple, he kept me on to be James's coach, essentially. And so then I kind of went through the grad program in philosophy at Loyola, and then I coached James through his career. And he ended up doing really well. Jumped 786 in the long jump and 1591 in the triple. He ran a 6.7 in the 60. 10. Oh, I had him run the 100 twice, I think, but he ran 10.5 at Benedictine, actually.
Nice. Great.
And so yeah, he had a great career. And then I had another girl, Candice Karajan. She was just a walk-on girl that jumped I think like 17.1 and 36.2 in high school from small town Illinois. And she ended up jumping 20 feet 3 and 41.8 in the triple jump. So yeah, she did really well. And there was several others as well, but those were kind of the two heavy hitters. And then eventually there's some coaching changes and a new head coach came in and he hired me as a full-time coach at Loyola in 2014. And at that point, I went from being coaching just kind of like long triple and high jump to coaching everything speed power. And so I kind of like got thrown in the deep end. And I was, really nervous about it at first, but I was wanting to coach the sprints. I felt like, especially the 400, I was like really excited to coach the sprints and the hurdles and a little bit of the throws and combined events, along with the jumps. And it felt very overwhelming at first, but I also know that like I think it's like really that's one like motto I have throughout my coaching career is to like dive into challenges even if you don't feel ready. I think that's really important. That was like something I learned kind of at that moment, I'd say. And I've kind of had that ethos throughout my career. Because I think that's like the best way to learn is just sort of embrace the challenge, even though if you don't feel even remotely ready, maybe that's the best way to learn, And so, but yeah, it was great. We really vibed with the sprinters and the hurdlers that first year. And I think we broke like maybe 18 school records that season. In 2015 season, we had 3 guys break 21 in the 200. And then James was still on the team. Antoine was a transfer he was from my high school, Lombard East, and then he transferred in from Concordia out in River Forest. He's a D3 guy, and he ended up jumping 25 feet, and I actually taught him how to triple jump. Like he had never triple jumped before, but he's just so explosive. And so I just like told him after his first year, like, hey, I kind of want to try this triple jump thing with you. Because I had him do bounding to train for long jump. And he ended up jumping 1583. So he got over 52 feet in 1 year, actually. So yeah, it was pretty crazy. He had a great year. And so that first year was a lot of fun, just kind of taking on new challenges and coaching the 400, the 100, the 200, the short hurdles, long hurdles, both relays, long, triple, high jump, dabbling in some throws and combined events. And so it was good. And then so I just kind of continued on there as an assistant, one more additional year. So 2 years as a full-time assistant. But having been at Loyola for like 6-7 years at that point. And then the head coach, he left to take the distance job at Iowa, Randy Hessenbank. And then the AD at the time, Steve Watson, he's still the AD there. Great guy. He's like 7 feet tall, just friendliest guy you'll ever meet. Yeah, really, really salt of the earth, that one. Always really like being around him and the vibe he had. And so he knew like I was like really well connected with the team. He saw the results and everything. And he came the day Randy left, he came into my office and he was like, Bob, you want to be the head coach? And I told him, I was like, well, like, Steve, you understand that because we don't have an indoor track or an outdoor track or any facilities whatsoever, we train in hallways. There's never been a non-distance head coach in Loyola history. You understand this, right? Like, do you understand what you're doing here? And he was like, I'll be fine. Like, you're doing a great job. Like, you got a good handle on the team. We'll roll with it, And so, yeah, after a few days, I talked to family, friends, my wife, who was my girlfriend at the time. And everyone was like, you'd be crazy not to take this. Like, because if you don't take it, then they're going to bring in some other distance guy who's going to get rid of you and get rid of all speed power events and just make it a distance program because you don't have a track. That's what it is. And so I was like, oh, I guess I have to take it, And so yeah, so then I became head coach for 5 years at Loyola. It was immensely challenging. I mean, I could map out what a day at Loyola looks like, but I'm not going to do that. But I had to construct the track from scratch every day, have practices, then clean up the whole track every day, and then go do my office work as head coach. And so it was just like unbelievably long hours. And like, yeah, I like if someone asked me to do that work again today, I would just say no, I'm not doing that. Like I can't do it. Like I think like sometimes you get thrust into situations where you don't have any other choice to do it one way, or what I could have done is could have just been like, screw it, I'm just going to be the head coach and we're only going to have distance runners and I'll be a manager. I could have done that and I'd probably still be employed there now. But that's just not like in my DNA. I want to
Yeah,
coach speed power events, and that was my love. That was my pride and joy, my life's work. And so, kind of building a speed power event tradition there at Loyola, just training in hallways almost the entire year, it was like pretty unique, and it was special time. Or really connected with the kids, and we really had our own like kind of culture of the team there, and all those school records will never be broken ever again because it's all distance now.
yeah, yeah.
But yeah, in 2021 they decided to cut the cord with me for that reason. I was probably creating too many problems within the athletic department because I was really stubborn about being able to have practice. And so that created a lot of conflict with basketball and volleyball and all these other teams.
That's wild.
I was just trying to have a practice.
How dare you?
That's all I wanted. And like, things kept getting like kind of like reduced mostly because of COVID. And
Yeah,
that like made me go even more extreme, where I'd be willing to have practices in fire escape halls and do it. I'll go at 6 a.m. I'll go at 9 p.m. I'll go whenever. I'll go in any hallway, anywhere, anytime. And then I think the other side of that is I think Steve just kind of realized like Bob's just trying to like fit a square in a round peg all this time. And he's right. He's 100% right about that.
yeah.
Wasn't like a sustainable thing we were doing. And so he just decided to kind of move on and didn't renew my contract. And then they hired a new head coach, Gavin, who I've met. He's a good guy. I've talked to him before. Chatted with him at meets. And then they turned it into all distance and seems to be going well. I mean, I think it was probably inevitable that they would do that, given the facility situation. And I have no like hard feelings. Like I still text with Steve probably like 2, 3 times a year. And so, we're on very good terms. He's given me some recommendations over the last several years as well.
Nice.
And so yeah, it's all good there. And then yeah, then I spent the whole summer of 2021 just trying to find a job. And I was honestly like pretty frustrated. I thought like I had a pretty good uh a pretty good resume, and I thought I could be a pretty good applicant. But I didn't care where it was. Like I just didn't want my coaching career to end like that. And
Yeah,
and I was applying to D3, D2, NAI, D1, Power 5, mid major, everywhere. Like I remember applying to NYU. I remember applying to American University in DC, which is like a small mid-major.
Oh
You know,
yeah.
I applied to Iowa State. I applied to I don't know, like yeah, I would have to go back through my emails, but it's had to have been 50, 60 applications, and I heard back from this many of them.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah,
Like,
I got no, and the only reason I got in touch with Joe Franklin at New Mexico was one of my good coaching friends, Austin Brobst. He currently coaches the women's jumpers at SMU, and he has a couple pros he works with. Like he coaches Jacob Fitcham Dukes, the British long jumper, he's in Paris right now. If he'll probably make the final, I bet. Like I think
nice.
he's had a really good year. He's jumped like 8:22 this year or something. Um, and so but Austin's like a good friend of mine. He used to coach at New Mexico with Joe, and so he called Joe and he's like, "Hey, you got to talk to Bob. Like I think he'd be a great fit with you." And so yeah, I just talked to Joe kind of like pretty early on in June 2021. And then I had a couple conversations with him, and then a couple conversations with Laura Bowerman, who is the assistant to Joe at New Mexico. And I just kind of like was sort of in this limbo period where I'd talk to him periodically from kind of mid-June all the way until early August. Because I probably had other applicants ahead of me, and then they probably got rejected. And then I was like maybe like fifth in line or something. That's my guess.
Last
Joe's
man
told me,
standing.
but I don't care. It's fine. Like it worked out because I did a Zoom call with Joe and Laura like August 5th or something. I don't know what it was in 2021, and they offered me the job, and um, yeah, and then I accepted it like the next day, and then actually I got a call from Idaho about the sprints because I had applied there too about their sprints job. But I told them I was like, hey man, if you had called me one day earlier, I'd be all about it. But yeah, I've already accepted the gig at New Mexico. And so so yeah, so then yeah, packed up the U-Haul, drove to Albuquerque, and yeah, I had two just unbelievable years there. It was like two of the best years of my life for sure. It was just like I was excited to have an opportunity after like, applying to all these places and no one giving me a shot. That was frustrating. Um, I felt like I had a chip on my shoulder and wanted to prove something. There was a bit of that, I'll be honest. But I was just happy to have another opportunity, and not only that, but a place that had a track. Like I never had a track before. Like I just never had that. Like I was just like I had told Joe that I was like, man, I remember when I got there, I parked the U-Haul and I walked to the office to meet Joe. And the office is actually on the outdoor track. Like it's just like a hut that's on the outdoor track. And I walked in, I was like, whoa, your office is on the track? You have a track. It's like, yeah, yeah, Bob, we have a track, like track and field team. Like, man,
Yeah.
you don't know, man. You don't know. You don't know what it's like
Yeah.
building a makeshift track every day with slabs of track in Gentile, the concourse area of Gentile Arena. You don't know, man. And
Yeah.
so yeah, and then yeah, our indoor track at New Mexico was definitely one of the best on the planet. I mean, the thing was extraordinary. And so yeah, it was great. Yeah, unbelievable 2 years, such a unique experience. Never had lived outside of Chicagoland before, and yeah, I loved my 2 years there. It was just like yeah, two of the best years of my life, and yeah, it really clicked with the team. I was coaching same thing I did at Loyola, a little bit of everything. I did 400, 200, 100 short hurdles, long triple. I didn't actually really coach the high jump. But I did coach a decathlete my first year there. And yeah, I got him to jump 203, I think it was, from a 195 PR.
Nice.
Uh, and yeah, he did really well. And then I coached him in the javelin as well, like in the open javelin. He made the regional meet. And so yeah, yeah, really good crew. I mean, the 400 was definitely the main event we had there. Had three guys run 45 in the open, and We made the NCAA meet in the 4x4 2 years in a row, broke a 50-year-old school record. And yeah, Rivaldo, our foreigner hurdler, he transferred from South Carolina, and yeah, he ended up running 49.63 in the 4 hurdles, made it to the actual NCAA final. So yeah, that was super exciting. And so yeah, awesome, just unbelievable. It's like a dream 2 years almost. Like I always look back on it in that way, just like a kind of a storybook fairy tale experience of 2 years there at New Mexico that I loved. And but yeah, and then in 2023, June 2023, we were at the national meet, the NCAA meet in Austin outdoors. And Joe like told me he had to talk to me. And I was like, oh, he's never said that to me before.
Uh-oh.
And so it was like, 9 p.m. at night, like Tuesday night or something, right when we got to NCAA's, I think on Monday or Sunday, I forget. But we just like walk laps around the hotel for like 2 hours. And we were just talking and talking. He's like, Bob, I'm going to Louisville. I'm going to Louisville, and I want you to come with me. I'm like, oh man, I got to sit down. Oh my God. And
Yeah.
and I was like, yeah, I mean, I want to go, but I got to talk to my wife. I got to like think about this. And we had such an incredibly good thing going at New Mexico. It's like kind of hard to leave that too, And um so yeah, it took a few weeks to kind of think it over. I actually went to it was like Joe talked to me. We finished out the NCAA meet, and then I went to India for 10 days or 9, 10 days with one of the long jumpers I coached. And so I was like kind of like managing I was in on the other side of the planet, in 135-degree weather, essentially, coaching one of the New Mexico long jumpers. And I was also trying to figure out, do I want to stay at New Mexico or go to Louisville, and all this stuff. And so it was very chaotic, to say the least.
Yeah.
But in the end, after talking with my wife and her like encouraging me, and just also just being closer to Chicagoland, so a lot closer to home, which is nice. And it's a Power 5 job. I mean, that's kind of the goal, like getting in this profession. That's sort of where you want to be, right? And so it took me 20 years to get there. And plus I could continue working for Joe Franklin, best boss I ever had. He's a genius. I think he's truly a genius. He's such an unbelievably good head coach. And the fact that I could go to Power 5, be close to home, and continue to work for Joe was just like I couldn't pass that up. And so yeah, I took the job, and just finished out my first year here at Louisville. I was separated from my wife for that year because she still had another year at New Mexico with her job at the UNM hospital. And so it was kind of challenging, just kind of, yeah, getting thrust into this new position. But I really like the team and the group here at Louisville. It was a bit of a rocky season for a multitude of reasons. Some really freak accidents, and just kind of, coming into a new program, there's always going to be some adjustments, but overall it was really good. Like, yeah, Brian Stevens had a great year. He made NCAA indoor and outdoor, jumped 223 in the high jump and made the trials. And so he's only 19 years old too, and so he's still really young. And
Jeez.
so a lot of room to grow there. And Soli, women's high jumper, got over that 6 foot threshold, which is, massive for a women's high jump, and made her first ever NCAA meet. Had never even come close before. And so yeah, that was exciting. And so yeah, overall really good. Signed some really, really, really good triple jump recruits that I have coming in, and a really good guy high jump recruit too. And so yeah, I feel like this upcoming year could be pretty darn special. Like this girl I signed from Estonia back in November, she just jumped 44 feet as an 18-year-old in the triple jump. 44
Okay.
feet.
I mean, if she's in the
Yeah.
mood.
Yeah, she's legit. Yeah, she's the real deal. And so
Jeez.
yeah. So now I have another girl that's jumped 43.8 coming in as well. And so yeah, that women's triple jump crew is already very good. Like we were in those event squad rankings, we were ranked top 5 in the nation pretty much the whole year.
Yeah.
Uh, it was just like we had a really deep squad. Like Alba jumped 42.8, but then I had a couple other like Rachel jumped 41.3, I think it was, and then Sophia was 40 feet 10. Autumn jumped 40 feet 8. Riley jumped 41.2 or something like that. So it was just like really, really like deep squad, and so
Yeah.
so graduated a few of them, but then you got these two monsters coming in, and so yeah, I'm really excited about them. And then I have a guy that's transferring in that's jumped 52.1 in the triple. And
Nice.
he's only 19 years old as well. And so yeah, so really good crew of recruits coming in, and so definitely very, very excited about the future. And so here I am. I'm just a kid from Slumbard, now slumming it up in Louisville, Kentucky.
Yeah. Well, okay, so I've had I got the pleasure of hosting you here at Elmhurst for a lecture.
Yeah.
Um and I want to do I'm going to steal your thunder here, Nico. Sorry. So, knowing kind of going through that lecture where you talked a lot about working with your Kaiser, kind of monitoring power outputs.
Uh-huh.
If you had to go the other direction and you had to go from Louisville having the Kaiser
Hmm.
back to New Mexico, no Kaiser.
Yep.
Um, I know Nico, you're dying to ask this question, but I'm taking it. So how would you mimic for that situation if you got VBT but no velocity based training for anyone not familiar with that? Um, how would you recreate where you're at with Louisville and kind of the
Hmm.
multitude of tools you have? Because I'm what it blows me away is you go from Loyola hallways, 1080 sprint,
Yeah.
um,
Right.
dump some tech to New
Yep.
Mexico where
No tech. No tech
no
at all.
tech,
I didn't even
but
I
weather
didn't
and a
have
track.
timing gates. So yeah, Loyola, zero facilities, but a lot of training tech.
Yeah,
I was able to get a 1080 sprint through some budgeting gymnastics with my guy Alan Peterson, who's now at GVSU. Unbelievably good coach. Like this
yeah,
guy's going to be a Hall of Fame distance coach someday for sure. But we like, I told him like when I hired him as an assistant, I was like, Alan, I need like 20K for a 1080 sprint. How are we going to do this? And he
yeah,
was like, oh. And but we did it, and
yeah,
so but that being said, and I also had what helped is I had Dave Vitale, who's the head strength coach at Loyola at the time. He's actually at TC Boost now. If you guys know TC Boost up
yeah,
in the north
yeah.
suburbs, yeah. So he resigned Loyola and then took the gig took a gig at TC Boost. But Dave was phenomenal and he was very tech oriented. And so he had tendos. We kind of put our heads together to get a K box. I got a 1080. And like we're always talking about uses of those machines and we are toying around with it. And he wasn't my strength coach my whole time at Loyola, but he was my strength coach. I believe it was the last 3 years. I could be wrong about that. Maybe it's 4, I forget. But so that like there was we built a culture of training technology at Loyola, essentially. And so zero facilities, a lot of training tech, super cool. Uh Go to New Mexico, all the facilities in the world, unbelievable weather, pretty much year round. Absolutely no training technology. I mean nothing. Like no VBT in the weight room. I didn't even have timing gates until the last 2 months I was there, which I only used really with one athlete, more the 100-meter guy, Victor Akalu. He's a 400 guy that I converted down to the 100. So I only really used it with him. I did fly 30s to get him ready for conference, and which is great. It's super helpful, but it was just so late in the year that like the 400 guys were kind of past the max V stuff into speed endurance, the really specific 400 stuff. So I didn't really use it with them. And so, and then yeah, Louisville, you kind of got both. So it's in that sense, like we have incredibly good facilities here at Louisville. Uh, the outdoor track's a little worn, but it's going to get redone probably pretty soon. The indoor track is like 3 years old. It's a 200-meter banked Mondo, insanely good track.
Nice.
And then yeah, we have even more training tech at Louisville than we did at Loyola. Like we have a Kaiser belt squat. We have two Kaiser belt squats, which I love that machine. Never had a Kaiser before, so my first time. We have gym awares. Only we don't have very many functioning gym awares. So I only had access to gym aware in the fall, and then during the season, I had no access to gym aware anymore. So I was a little annoyed and frustrated with that. Um, and then we had Hawkins force plates. I use that the whole year. Those things are unbelievably cool. And so yeah, I use that as well. And so so yeah, but at the end of the day, I'd say, probably the two you could maybe this year was as successful or maybe in some ways more successful, getting several athletes to the Olympic trials and the NCAAs, but two of my best years of my career were with zero training technology at all. And so I do think there's something to be said that you don't actually need it. And maybe that's like something you guys don't want to hear. Uh, or maybe it is what you want to hear. I don't
That's
know.
exactly what I want to hear.
Yeah, I don't think you
Because I don't
need
have
it.
it.
I don't think you need it. I think it is very beneficial. But the problem that I personally have with this is my own fault with training tech is just there's just so much you can do with it, and there's so much data you can accumulate. It just becomes overwhelming.
Yeah.
And then like I remember just this past fall at Louisville, like if you watched our training from, end of August when we started to around like November 8, 9, 10, somewhere in there, it was just like a meteoric progression. Like all the numbers I was tracking on the 1080, especially, like we're just like booming week over week. And I was just like, I was really excited about it. And then I remember there was like this rapid decline for about 10 days where it just like the numbers fell off a cliff. And I was like, what just happened? And then I had the realization. I remembered that, man, when was the last time I was actually just like coaching the athletes on acceleration? I spent the last like 4 weeks looking at numbers on a tablet, deciding what resistance I was going to go to based off the numbers, and getting totally lost in the numbers the athletes are producing and not watching like hardly anything. And so then I was just like, 1080's going over there. We're just going back to the basics so I could get them back up. And so I think there's like, it's such it's like a drug in a way with training tech. It's so cool. It's so interesting. There's so many uses for it. So many cool data points you can develop, as you saw in that talk at TFC. But you have to strike a balance with it. You really, really have to strike a balance with it. Um, and so I definitely want to say that and so like going into this year, I actually am going to reduce my uses of technology. I'm still going to use all this. I'm going to use Kaiser. I'm going to use the 1080. I'm going to use the Hawkins force plates, but it's going to be a lot more structured and it's going to be less use of it. Because at the end of the day, the most important things are getting the fundamentals down, coaching the athletes specifically, and motivating. Like those are the most important things. And then
Yeah.
like if you can get like really nuanced and detailed and if you want to split hairs with training tech and all these cool progressions, by all means do it. I think you might find some, hidden treasures in there, but that is not the main thing. And
Yeah.
so it's like when like a little sidebar here, and then I'll go back. I will answer your question about how I do it without training tech, but like I feel like, you know, I gave that talk at TFC on coordination-based strength because it's something
Yeah.
I do. I do believe in it. I use water bags all the time. I've read all of Franz Bosch's work. I spent a week with Franz Bosch in person, learned from him face to face, and I've thought about different ways to incorporate coordination-based strength. And I feel like a lot of coaches ask me about coordination-based strength because it's just not very common here in the US. And
Yeah.
they ask me all these questions on how to use it. I get Twitter messages quite often about it. I get texts and calls, but I always tell people like, look, man, this is the 10th most important thing I do.
Yeah. Yeah.
This isn't the primary thing. Like, please understand, this is like, there's so many other things that are so much more important than this. But it is something I value and I like doing and I believe in it. And it's a component of my training, but it's not the end. It's like, I think like people think it's like the main thing I do when it's like, I think it's the 10th most important thing I do. And that's
Yeah.
kind of how I see training technology. You know,
Yeah.
I think it's very useful, but you have to keep yourself in check with it because you can start to go down a rabbit hole that distracts you from the main things, you know. And so anyways, the way I would do it, like I mean, essentially with Kaiser, you're trying to get pneumatic resistance. You're trying to get the experience of lifting where the athlete has to keep accelerating the resistance through the full range of motion. That's essentially what you're getting with the Kaiser, is you're getting the same resistance every moment of a lift.
Got it.
And so like if you do a squat, the actual weight of the bar, like maybe you have 300 pounds on the bar in a squat, but when is it actually 300 pounds? It's probably like a fraction of a moment at a sticking point,
Yeah.
the lift, but then like the rest of the time it's probably feeling more like 150 pounds or something. You know what I mean?
Like at velocity
So
zero, you're at 300.
yeah, exactly. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So like if you're on a Kaiser and I put 300-pound resistance on the Kaiser belt squat, that's the only machine I'm familiar with. I've never used any other one. So if I say all my references are based on the Kaiser belt squat for anyone watching this. Uh, it's going to be 300 pounds at every fraction of a second the whole way.
Hmm.
And so it's as hard at the bottom as it is on the top in many respects. And so you're getting all this pressure, like, well, with the belt on your waist, it's pulling you down with that pressure the entire time, which
Okay.
that's how it's so incredibly valuable because it strengthens the full range. And you get, I think for me, the main thing you get out of it, and one of the primary things that I'm focused on training in the weight room is, I've heard different terms for it, like dynamic isometric strength is a sexy term that's getting thrown around these days a lot. But essentially you're just talking about amortization. You're talking about reversing from eccentric to concentric, that rebounding ability, that reversal ability, whatever term you want to use, um, is fine. I usually just call it like reversal ability or DIS. Um, and to me, that I think the Kaiser does that in a very profound way because when you have all that pressure pushing you down and you got to bounce out of it, like that's just creates such an unbelievable stimulus that's hard to create anywhere else, I guess you'd say.
Yeah.
It's like plyometric on steroids, right? Like you can do depth jumps.
Yeah.
Gravity is the same, 9.8 meters a second, and then it's like your body weight, and then
Yeah. Yeah.
tremendously good.
Yeah.
And I use depth jumps. I'm at the top of the uses of depth jumps in the world of track and field coaches. Like I love depth jumps, use them all the time. I think they're absolutely critical.
Yeah.
But that will not even that can't compare to like the forces you would get out of just like a reactive Kaiser squat, you
Hmm.
know?
Can I
Like
interject
it could quite, yeah.
real quick? And I want to define training tech versus testing tech. So I think we got to get in this loop where Kaiser I feel like, is training tech. It creates a different stimulus than can be measured or done by any other piece of equipment. You're not going to do that with a barbell.
Right.
Different.
Correct. Yeah.
That's and the quantum, like the 1080 quantum, those, all of those things I would classify as training tech that is utilized to be able to create a stimulus that is not that you can't create without those
Yeah.
pieces of
Yeah.
equipment.
It's that,
where
that machine
exactly.
only. Yep.
And where we fall, a lot of times, we end up falling into the testing tech world where, oh, we have VBT, we have timing gates, we have force plates, and we have all this stuff for data collection that doesn't necessarily make the training any better. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, I agree 100%.
Velocity, it's still max velocity. It creates intent, but it doesn't create the training stimulus. So, and because I have that classification because I specifically asked Stone about this, is because how do you mimic those stimuluses without those devices? So I just want to clarify that for everyone, you know, the thousands and millions of people listening.
Millions.
So, okay, go on.
All of Lombard.
All of Lombard.
What's that? About 30K? 30K people?
Still over
like
in Elmhurst. All
six or seven in Elmhurst.
Will click on this link. Click on.
My wife, she'll play this.
I love that classification. That's exactly right. That's part of what makes Kaiser so unique is like, yeah, it creates a stimulus that's not possible outside of Kaiser. However, you can create similar stimuli, which is where I'm kind of going here with this. Just wanted to like introduce what the Kaiser is for people unfamiliar with it. But I haven't to work DIS, reversal ability, rebounding ability, whatever your term is. I don't only do the Kaiser. Kaiser is the main way to do it, but I've done a lot of like I use a lot of Cal Dietz's stuff with like AFSM type work. And then I do band resisted stuff, probably more than I do Kaiser, just because for time effectiveness. Like you can't, I do have two Kaisers there in the weight room. Well, I don't have them, but in our weight room at Louisville, we had two Kaiser belt squats, but it's just like, you get a kid on, they got to like put the belt on, and then we got to put the pneumatic resistance, get it right. It's a very sensitive thing. So if I want to get 400, for example, 400 pounds on the Kaiser, I gotta like if someone was just on at 200, I gotta hold the button while it builds, and then I'll let go, and it'll probably be like 404, and then I gotta go down a little. Oh shoot, it's 398, and then so you gotta like it takes time is my point. Like, but with band resisted work, I can kind of have everyone doing it at the same time, and I can do it more time effectively. And I still think it's enormously effective. Is it as specific and as like intense as the Kaiser? No, it is not. But it's definitely in the wheelhouse of it. And so like I can't it would be hard to get it super heavy, but I do a lot of like drop jumps type stuff with band resistance. So like you have a trap bar and then they would have bands connected to the trap bar. You could do it, you could have it attached to the rack and then on like over on top of the trap bar, so not actually connected to the trap bar, just like pushing it down. Or you could just do one band where it's hooked on the bars and the athlete is standing on top of the band. So you could do either one. But the point is like I might do like a AFSM drop, like you're holding the trap bar and then you relax and drop, hit stiff, and then jump. And so you're getting the bands to pull you down, right? It's accelerating you down into the ground. You have to hit stiff and absorb. I don't really like the term absorb, but like absorb the ground and then pop out of it. Yeah. So I'm overloading eccentric stiffness. I'm overloading that amortization and forcing the athletes to have to reverse out of it quickly. So that's like if you have a trap bar and you have a couple bands, anyone can do that. Yeah. You don't even have to have a trap bar. You can just use it with a squat or with the bar and do a drop jumps with with the squat bar. And so you could hook the bands up to the bar and just do a drop into a jump. And then so it would be like it's a really rapid fire, and I'm too old to demonstrate, so I'm not going to. But I could send you guys some videos. Like I'm taking videos through the year.
Yeah.
But you could just like, do a AFSM drop if you're familiar with Cal Dietz's work. You drop, hit super stiff and bounce immediately up to it, and then the bands are gonna pull them down again after they jump. Then they just got to hit stiff again. So you actually get a couple points there with it. So I actually do that more than I use the Kaiser because of time effectiveness, and you can get more reps that way too. So I think and you could add weight to the bar if you want to, like if you want to or you could maybe use a light band and progress up to a heavier band, or maybe you do two bands. I mean, you could find ways to tinker a progression there. The way I've typically done that type of work is I'll start off maybe the first couple mesos where I'm only dropping and hitting stiff. And I categorize that in my program as eccentric stiffness. And so we'll do lots of reps of it, and maybe no band to start. Maybe you're just holding the trap bar, dropping and hitting stiff, and then maybe we add a little bit of weight to it over a week's time. And then after several weeks, they've adapted to that. Then we can add the band to it, so they're getting accelerated down into the ground. So yeah, you could do it that way. And then like the progression there is then I move into actually adding the jump into it. And so that's one way to do it. And then another way you could do it is you could do like overloaded plyos. Like, depth jumps is perfect. Like I do depth jumps in the weight room, I do depth jumps on the track, just depending on the targeted stimulus of the day. But you could do like depth jumps with the bar on your back, like I think that would be very related. I've done that. You could do depth jumps with a weight vest on, right? You could do a depth jump holding some light dumbbells, right? And maybe you have them hit, and then after they hit the ground, they could drop it and then bounce up. So you get almost like a super compensation effect, or like a boost effect, if you will. So I definitely think there's many ways you can train whatever your term is, DIS or reversal ability. That's essential. I think when in the world of sprinting and jumping, that's such like a primary thing that sort of gets overlooked, is training that reversal ability. That's like the philosopher's stone, if you will. That's like the crux. Because if you can bounce better, it's all about bouncing, right? Like if you can bounce, sprinting is bouncing, jumping is bouncing. Like if you can bounce better, if you can bounce, be stiffer, and be able to convert from eccentric to concentric, maybe slightly quicker, just think about how much that would change a 400-meter sprint or a triple jump or a high jump, or, name it, even an 800s, I would argue, that would change it entirely. And so I definitely think there's ways to train what the Kaiser trains in a very similar fashion. Like even a progression for me is with squats. I tend to just like do deep squats early in the year, just build absolute strength. And then like it might turn into a box squat. So it's more like a medium range of motion rather than a full range of motion, but still extremely heavy. And then it might be a box squat with band resistance and fast. And so with the band, you got a good amount of, maybe you got 250 pounds on the bar, but then you have the band resistance, and probably not even 250, probably more like 200 or 150 with the band resistance. And then you're just going fast, or trying to go as fast as you can. And that's sort of like another use of AFSM, if you will, because it's like a relaxation contraction, and you're trying to move fast, you're trying to reverse fast. So that would be another way to do it. You could just do squats with band resistance, or you could do trap bar deadlift with band resistance, with high intent, trying to move it as fast as possible over the course of 6 to 8 reps or something like that, So yeah, so I think there's ways, I definitely think there's ways you can train it. Will it be as intense and targeted as the Kaiser? No, but it's definitely extremely effective, I would say. Yeah.
In that, we've used, I started using like drop catch stuff. So it's like
Yeah.
drop
Yeah.
stuff. What are your thoughts on like the different types of individuals? I feel like, so I don't, training at the level we're at, that I'm at with youth individuals, like I don't go into
No.
that realm until, if they've been lifting with me for 3 years and now we're in our senior year and we just want a new stimulus to
Yeah.
rest them. All right, cool. We'll get into that. I've had a concern over the last like summer, this summer, because now I'm looking at it. I've got girls that have been doing this for 3 years. There's something a little bit more that I can give them, but I'm always concerned about the difference between some of the more elastic athletes and overloading them, and that's with that type of work, and then setting them up for failure for the rest of the week. Meaning, like, their system just gets overloaded eccentrically. They're so elastic already that then they just peter out after 2 or 3 sets, and then they're roasted for 2 days.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. What I'd say is um, with that really intense, like eccentric stiffness type work, um, I think there's a sense in which you don't want to do it for too long. I think that is a mistake I made this year is like I was getting so excited about the stimulus and I was really seeing unbelievable improvements on the Hawkins. Like we did a single leg depth jump test like the whole year almost. And like by the time March came around, like the RSI numbers just started like booming. And but then it was like I couldn't hold on to it after that. And so like I almost feel like we peaked like maybe mid-April instead of like end of May, if you will, or something like that, And so which is it's sort of a generalization. It's not totally accurate, but I'll my point is what I'm getting at is it's not something I want to do the same thing over the course of the year. Like I think you have a phase where you're doing the stiffness, just dropping, hitting stiff, a phase where you're doing the reversal and jumping out of it. But like in your case, if the state meet it's like early June, right? Or no, end of May, right? For women.
Mid-May for us, yeah.
Yeah, mid-May. Like I probably would not be doing that stuff if the state meet is May 20th, right? I would not be doing that stuff after April 20th.
Yeah.
I would have probably loaded it up a lot after like leading up to that. And then I'd drop it and focus almost exclusively on concentric and moving fast. Because I think that's like a good way to peak and it's a good way to minimize wear and tear is shifting from all the eccentric stiffness into fast concentric movement.
Yeah.
Then you're eliminating like all that them feeling wrecked and worn down, especially the super elastic kids. But you're still getting that priming stimulus where they're moving weight fast,
Yeah.
just without like a big cost on the muscle tissue, if you will. Yep.
In that, have you ever touched on or had any systems that were able to track your time to peak velocity rather than just means?
Yeah, you're referring to Rolf Oman.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah. I know I remember he mentioned it somewhere, like I think it's Move Factor X that can do it, but
yeah.
I've never had it, no. So I love the idea of it, but I've never had access to that, no.
Yeah. Because that's where I was getting into the VBT stuff over the last year, and I just found that it was indifferent. I understood it. We were doing it, but was it really changing anything that we
Yeah.
were really doing?
Yeah.
Aside from driving intent, definitely drives
Yes.
100%. So
Yep.
athletes were like, "Oh, I want that number to be up there."
Yep.
But you also get it's like, okay, where do we stop? Where is too heavy? Where is too light? And what number are we really looking for? And then listening to Ralph's stuff, it's like you just can't measure the thing that really matters, which
It
is
really actually like matters. Yeah.
so
Yeah.
your DSI. It's like being able to have a huge DSI and then being able to get it to as fast, the acceleration as fast as possible. Like how many G's are you really pulling to accelerate that weight as fast as possible?
Yeah.
So that luckily, I think the device I use is called it's through Output Sports, and I've been emailing with them all summer to try and get their guys to implement that, because the data is
Okay.
there. They have the information. They just need to display it.
Ah, okay. Okay. They have
Hopefully,
to be able to like identify and
yeah,
plug it into all the data points that read out every time.
yeah.
Okay. Yep. Yep.
Yeah, I
No,
was just wondering if that's something that you've ever touched on, because that
no, I
seems.
haven't. I would love to, but yeah, 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 I don't think it's on GymAware. And once again, I had access to GymAware in the fall, but I did not have access.
Yeah.
They had to send 3 of their GymAware units to New Zealand to get fixed, and then the jumpers got at the bottom of the totem pole on who gets to use the GymAware.
Yeah.
And so I didn't get to use it. And it's, once again, it's like it's not the end of the world. Like I love being able to track the speeds we're moving a hang clean at. I think it's great. I even had a test we were doing in the fall where I turned, instead of just like a classic, we did like a clean test occasionally, but not really that much at all. But I would do a test occasionally where how much can you lift at 2 meters a second? That's like very fast, like probably on the peak speed power, and as opposed to force power, right? Force-based power. And that was like, I thought that was super useful. And then in theory, you could like, I think one of the questions you guys sent me about like uses of velocity-based training, and I mostly just use Brian Mann's categories. Like I read his book maybe like 8 years ago, and I like the simplicity of it. It's very easy to use, and you could just like, if you wanted to, you just be like, okay, I'm gonna work on uh uh strength speed and try to hit how much can you lift at 1 meter a second. And maybe that's like a data point you're testing for 1 or 2 mesos. And then you could be like, okay, I'm gonna do more speed strength and test how much I can move at 1.3 meters a second for 1 or 2 mesos. And then it could be like, all right, now we're getting really specific into like a really high level of speed strength, if you will, or starting strength, I think is the term he actually uses. And how much can you lift at 2 meters a second? And it drives intent, and then the stimulus is becoming more and more specific and more transferable that way. But at the end of the day, I don't think it's like the end all be all to have VBT. I had it at Loyola, super useful. Didn't uh didn't forgot it existed at New Mexico because I had no access to anything like it. And so it was just straight up, what's your clean max? That's what it was at New Mexico. That was the testing was just a straight up max. It was not had nothing to do with velocity. Yep.
I do also think there's a component of movement literacy. It doesn't matter how fast you're moving the movement if you're not moving it well.
Yeah.
At,
Yeah.
at this
I agree.
level, high school level, if you can't squat, then I'm not going to put any VBT
No.
device. I'm not going to even put heavy weight on you. Like, let's move,
Yeah.
and then grow into it eventually.
I mean, I think that's like I think especially with the young kids at the high school, very developmental level, middle school, early high school. Um, it's like sometimes you see these videos of kids running fly tens, and the coach is saying, "Man, I got my kid to improve 0.20 in the fly 10." I'm like, man, you could have had that kid do
Yeah,
push-ups and they would have improved in.
testosterone got him.
Yeah, like
Come on.
it doesn't matter at all.
Yeah.
But they're like running, and like you see all this, and it's like man, you have set this kid up to be a disaster 2 years from now. Like, and that's what I feel like. Yeah, it's almost like the coaches like yourself, Nikos, where you're working with these 12 to 17-year-olds, like you are either gonna make my life incredibly hard, or you're gonna make my life incredibly easy. Like it's so dependent on what you guys are teaching them, because I don't know, like so many kids I get in a program, especially like this past year, like I had this kid, this is a walk-on long jumper I inherited here at Louisville, and he jumped like I think he jumped 7 meters once or twice as a freshman. And then I got him when he was a sophomore, and it's like this kid doesn't even know how to run. He doesn't even know how to squat. He doesn't know how to run. He doesn't know how to jump. It's just like I mean, it's like it would be like if you it's like he couldn't read, you know, it's like a
Yeah.
kid that couldn't read going to the library or something. You know what I mean? It's like he just couldn't even do anything. And so I started to have him on the normal program early on, and I definitely saw some big improvements. But then eventually I just started like, I stopped having him lift. I just like his back would get hurt. He couldn't do it correctly. I was just like, you know what, man? Like, we're just gonna do general strength and bodybuilding the whole year. I'm just not gonna have you do neural lifting at all. It's not gonna do it.
Yeah.
And because it's like he didn't have that foundational, just general training, and he didn't know how to run. So it's just like, all right, we're just gonna do a lot of form running, a lot of wickets, a lot of tape excels. This is how it's supposed to feel. It wasn't about like getting gains, it was about getting literacy, like the word, using your word. And you know, he ended up jumping in a windy 762 this year. He jumped over 25. He's very consistent, 24.8, 24.7, 24.4, 24.8. And it was just strictly off doing what you should be doing with him. You know what I mean? I went back to, okay, this is what I would do if I was coaching sophomore in high school. You know, that's what I turned myself into for that kid. You know what I mean? And so so I definitely think like, yeah, if a kid his you know his spine can't handle a squat, it's like, man, like maybe you should just do general strength circuits. You know what I mean? Like that would probably be, it's not a sexy thing to do, and maybe it's hard to sell a kid and his parents on that, but undoubtedly it's the right thing to do. Yeah.
Let me ask you guys that, because that's one of the questions that I had for both of you, is the idea that where does the youth coach lie in terms of creating a successful athlete for the collegiate level? Or is it, hey, I'm going to get this kid to be the best high school athlete they can be? And I think more so for you, Dave, because you're going to see majority of the general population, and Bob, you're going to see more of the high level talented kids that didn't necessarily get any coaching. They're just beasts, right?
Yeah.
Whereas Stone, you'll probably see a bigger range of athletes like that were coached well, and that's why they got to your level. And then some that are just, have some talent but weren't coached at all, and that's where they fall.
Mm.
So where do you guys feel in there? I'll let you guys duke it out, and who wants to answer?
Go
I
ahead,
feel
Dave.
like Bob has the for sure like if someone comes to Bob that you have to unwind, like they're just too tangled up, I feel like that job is way harder at your level than my level necessarily. I think, oh boy, I think the big thing for me is really like kind of like what you said. If they have movement literacy, I can build on that. Um, I think I do get a wide range of levels of coaching, and selfishly, I really prefer under coaching because it makes me look really good. Like my top girl this year, had I thought a really good high school coach who did a lot of the right things, and it did not it did not propel her to a state meet. It did not propel her to even I think a sectional. I don't think she finished top five. She jumped over 10 meters one time, but her foundations were really, really good.
Okay.
So she was a jumped over 10 once, mostly 990s in the triple jump.
Mhm.
Um, Jumped 15 low a couple times in high school. And as a sophomore this year, she jumped 1139. She jumped 558. And it was one of those like I feel bad for the high school coach. Like he laid a great foundation. She had a lot of great sprint
Right.
mechanics.
Yeah.
Um, it was really easy to just move those sprint mechanics into jump mechanics, and all of a sudden she's jumping really, really well. And then on the other side, I have probably the most physically talented woman I've coached who never had any type of coaching and is just kind of jumping off vibes. And it's tremendously challenging in two ways. The first is physically teaching her these are like you were successful at the high school level. despite the things you're doing.
Yeah.
And I need to like convincing her that like we need to change this. Where she's like, I'm your best freshman. I'm like,
Right.
yes,
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
you are.
Be
But you can,
you could be the best in the country, maybe, you know.
yeah, yeah. That's so. So I think more than just teaching the movement literacy to me is relatively easy to teach if you can slow down and take the
That's
time
it.
to do it,
Yeah.
and if they're bought in.
Yeah.
And I think the harder thing is to get the buy-in of like, why would I risk a result at a meet that's going to let someone beat me
Yeah.
when I can just keep doing this and finishing at this level?
Yeah.
Um, so I think the one side of it is like there's a lot of movement literacy to teach, which is not the most impossible thing to do, and I think just takes time and patience, which 18 to 22-year-olds are not necessarily known for. 14 to 18-year-olds less so.
Yeah.
Um, but I do
They want
think,
to post on here.
yeah, yeah, exactly. Um, so then the other side of it is getting buy-in, but I found that even before I got her to go to buy-in, I had to teach her how to receive coaching.
Okay.
So she had never been coached.
You're
So
like peeling back layer by layer almost. Yeah.
yeah, it was if we were doing a drill and she was not connecting the drill quickly, as arguably, very much probably the best freshman I've ever recruited, if the drill wasn't working, we're done.
Okay.
I'm trying to slow down. Hey, slow down, jump smaller. Let's start really small. Let's work on patterns. And nope, you know. So I would almost go to it's less mechanical for you, Nico, and it's more ethos philosophy of
Hmm.
slow down to go faster. In terms of learning and performance, if when I know what I love about athletes that I never get Nico's athletes. It's just not a thing that happens. They're they're like, dude, I literally my high school is further from home than the college.
Yeah.
Um, I had that conversation this year. I would be going closer to home
Yeah.
if I went to the college. But the thing that I know Nico's athletes walk out of high school with is that there's a separation between how you train and how you perform. Like, and that I may be saying that backwards. There's definitely a connection, but it's you can go run 13 flat in training for the 100 if we're doing it really, really well. That doesn't mean you're running 13 flat for the 100 in competition. And I know Nico's athletes know that.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
slowing down and doing it right and moving on to the next phase is more important than necessarily like having the great practice result.
Yeah.
So Nico, I think that's my quick take on that is a coachable athlete more than a movement literacy base. But if we're talking movement literacy, I'm pretty basic. I really, really want them able to squat and hinge.
Yeah.
I can almost teach almost anything else quickly. But someone who has poor squat and hinge patterns takes because it's so high injury risk and it's so high like on the list of things that are foundational to almost everything else we do. If they can't do those two things, then we're spending time on it, which I don't call wasted time, but it's, if I don't have to do it, I don't want to do it. But yeah, squat and hinge are like the two that I'm like, yeah, if you can do those two things, everything else can come relatively quickly.
Yeah, I think I would definitely agree with Dave on the coachability point because I think like I just tend to think like the less developed or younger an athlete is, the more I'm going back steps into more general type stuff, you know. And then the more advanced, the older, the more specific things are. And I'm not just talking about the program. I'm talking about like even just like the coachability, like Dave said. Like I don't have to think about the coachability with like Jake. I think you met him, Dave, the British long jumper that I've worked with at New Mexico and Louisville.
Yeah.
I don't think about like, oh, is this guy coachable? How can I make him more coachable? Like, it doesn't cross my mind, Um, but like if I'm thinking about a 13, 14 year old, then that's probably one of the key things I'm going to think about is like getting them to learn how to communicate, learning how to communicate with them effectively. So I really like that because it's such a broader philosophical thing, and I think that's how you have to think with the younger or the less developed athletes. But I would say, like to your question, Nikos, with younger athletes and preparing them for beyond, I think to me it would start with like if a kid comes to you, uh, I think you got to ask them like, okay, are we aiming to maximize high school or are we aiming to maximize end of college? Like maybe that's a conversation you're having with the parents and the kid, right? And because yeah, I mean, not every kid's going to compete in college, right? So maybe you're going to have a lot of kids be like, man, I just want to make it to state and be done. That's the end of my career. So in that case, yeah, I mean, maybe you got to push. Maybe you're not looking for perfect movement literacy. You got to have some for sure, but maybe you're going to push the envelope with the speed and power and the strength lift and strength work with a kid like that. But if you have a kid that's thinking about that next level, then maybe you're gonna take more time to like maybe you're gonna write a very like macro plan for them and be like, this year is about moving learning how to move these patterns correctly. And then this year is we're gonna add load onto those movements. And then the third year we're gonna add speed into these movements. Maybe you think about it much more broadly. And so I think it essentially comes down to what is the kid's objective? Is it high school and done, which probably more than half your kids would be that, right?
Yeah.
Or is it going to be like, oh no, I need to prepare myself to compete at a high level and make an NCAA meet someday or whatever, get a scholarship or whatnot. Because that is a different that paves a slightly different, probably not too much different, but it paves a slightly different path. But yeah, I do think like in terms of just that's what I'd say in terms of like getting them ready for high school versus college. But then in terms of just like my view as a college coach for coaches working with kids at a more developmental level, I think the coachability one was huge that Dave talked about. And then I'd say emotional control is a big one. I don't think
Oof.
kids learn that very well. I would say every year that I've been in coaching, that has become a bigger problem. And I'm like really serious about it. Like kids have such a hard time handling failure. And
Mhm.
it's just like failure is so good for you. It's like an apple a day keeps the doctor away. It's like that's kind of how I look at failure because undoubtedly you are going to fail so many more times than you're going to succeed in sport. And kids need to learn how to have a more, I don't know, like we'll call it a growth mindset, like Carol Dweck, like whatever your term is, like that. I mean, that encapsulates everything, I think. But I think kids need to learn that at a very young age, and the younger you can start to get them to think that way, the better. Because I've had a lot of trouble, especially recently, really trying to get kids to understand that okay, you fouled out at this meet doesn't mean you're going to foul out the rest of your career. It's just like
Yeah.
what we do is we're adults, and so we sit down and we discuss the problem and we think about possible solutions, and then we try those solutions. And if the first solution doesn't work, hey, we tried. We move on to the second solution. We try this solution, didn't work. Hey, okay, these are great data points that we're using now. Let's try the third solution. And so that's where I think that to me is very high up there is learning how to manage failure and success.
Yeah.
I've seen kids that like had success very quickly and early, and then it's like they don't know how to duplicate it. They think they got it. And I've seen that very many times and very recently too. And so I think coachability, emotional regulation, learning how to manage success and failure, I think you notice how we're not talking about like fly tens and
Yeah.
like I know and I say that with a grain of salt because of course you have to train the kids, and that's gonna be the next thing I talk about. But I'm telling you, those things are just so much more. Like if you could nail those two things and then just had the kids do the most basic training in the world, I bet they do super well. Honestly, I really do.
Yeah.
One of the biggest I think most impactful changes that I did last year, this took me 10 years to figure out, was to ensure that I got rid of, so if we were doing a fly 30, I did not display personal bests. I only displayed year to date metrics. Where were we at last year? What are we doing this year? On this day last year.
Okay. Okay.
We could,
Yeah.
because the program is relatively similar, there's always going to be nuances year to year, but my training philosophy hasn't changed much over the last 5 years. It's like I know that we're going to be within this realm. So they all of a sudden start to see themselves as, oh, okay, this time last year, I'm faster than I was this time last year. That's where you're not going to run what you ran in May in February. So now we look at those times, and even in the weight room, that was a big thing too. Like summer numbers are bigger than May numbers. You're not going to be putting up the weights that you put up in the fall in April. That's not how we're going to do it. It doesn't make sense. So that was on that point, because they were just this idea that we need to rank and record and publish everything is such a
PR. There's like a sorry to
time
interrupt
you have
there.
to do it.
There's like a assumption, an unconscious assumption.
Yeah.
If I don't PR, I failed.
Yeah.
They don't see that's like the background of it. You know what I mean? But yeah, you could not PR for 5 months and I'd be totally fine, you know?
It was like one of the biggest challenges with summer meets. Girls that realize their junior year that, oh, I can do this. I can run in college. I see myself doing that. And now they go into the summer and I say, hey, listen, you have to take this summer. I understand that you want to hit certain metrics so that other coaches are going to recognize you, but it is a totally different environment in the summer than when you were competing in May for the highest stakes you've ever competed in.
Yeah, right.
You have to realize that these meets in the summer don't have the same impact that the conference sectional and state series does.
Yeah.
So that's going to be different. And it's rare I have found it that it's very rare for my girls to PR in the summer. And also because the training is different. I try and keep it the same, but it's difficult to keep those the same, in general.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, I think I just think kind of finishing off that question segment there. Coachability, emotional regulation, learning to be solutions oriented. I think that's the right word I'm looking for. Like identify problems, don't run away from them, and just seek solutions instead of, oh, I had a bad meet, I'm a failure. I suck. Life is a disaster, because a lot of kids think that way, man. It's like, it's very common. It's more common than the mature, like I can handle problems that come my way and seek solutions,
Looking back, sorry to interrupt again, but looking back on it, for me personally, when you were coaching me, I thought that I had some sort of like control mentally, but it was crippling how lack of ability for me to understand how something actually progresses. And it took me 15 years to really understand that part about me as an athlete. And I was I was an adult.
Yeah. Honestly, yeah. It's like you really like I've been able to like I've really felt like I've had to work extra hard or coach extra harder to get kids to shift the way they think and respond emotionally. And I can get through to them, but I'm just thinking like, man, can you imagine if like whether it's parents or big brothers or whatever, role models or teachers or coaches, if they started doing this at like when they're 10 or 12, like, man, that's just like, I mean, it blows my mind to think about that. But just to finish that note, I do think like from a training standpoint, once again, I think just keep it very general. Like if a kid can't perform general strength, like should they really be loading the skeletal system that much? I mean, you know what I mean? So tons of general strength. I think adding a aerobic component is really healthy for young kids. Getting that slight bit of lactic, glycolytic type work, I think is super, super good for them. And they could do that every day almost through circuits, or you can make circuits fun and make it like a race or a relay race. I think, and that gets to my next point is they gotta have fun. They gotta enjoy it, right? They definitely have to work hard. They have to challenge themselves. They have to learn work ethic. I think those are key values and lessons. But they also have to enjoy the sport. If they've spent like 4 years of high school doing crazy intense specific training, I'm sure they had fun with it for a while, but they probably get a little burnt out from it too, And so I do think it's important to have some variety in the stimulus and to train them appropriate with tons of general training and just learning how to move decently especially with sprint mechanics. Because if they can't perform a max V position, which a lot of young kids really can't do that well, it's
No.
like if you have them go full throttle, you're just gonna ingrain these patterns and these compensations that are just gonna absolutely destroy them by the time they're 16, 17, 18. And if they're trying to run in college, like you've really set them up for failure. Yeah, you really have. And so that's where I think sprint mechanics, especially, like you really you don't have to be an A+, but you got to be a B-, like you have to be somewhat sufficient. And then squatting and hinging, obviously, like basic fundamental lifting patterns obviously play a big role. And so yeah, I don't know. I think with the younger kids, it's a lot more value based, emotional based, coachability, communication, learning to work hard, but also sustaining them having fun, learning to chase a goal over a long period of time, learning to think more long term.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
I think that's actually, now that I'm thinking about it, I think just having a more of a long term vision, because everyone is so like, now I don't want to go through a progression. I want to, I want to, I want to, I want to run 10-6 right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think it's like, I want to read this book. Like, I want to read this book. I don't want to read this book. Like, I just want all this to be in here now. I don't want to
Yeah.
have to like spend 7 hours to read this. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, that's just another like background unconscious like assumption that they want the ticket, the
Yeah.
gets them the results immediately. They want the hidden treasure, not the long drawn out process. And that's just not the work. That's not how reality works,
Do you
And go
oh,
ahead.
do you think that's because we don't put prizes in the bottoms of cereal boxes anymore?
B, it could very well. That's such a disappointment, isn't it? So
You know,
Yeah.
I was thinking the same thing about the scooper in the protein shake. It's like
Oh God.
got to dig all the way at the bottom. It's the same kind of gold that you're looking
you
for.
got to work for it, man. You got to consume it. Yep.
Well, I email my team. I email my whole team every Monday over the summer, and I don't know how many read it. I find out eventually when they start to ask me questions, and I'm like, I literally emailed you like a book's worth of information on this.
Yeah.
Um, but over the summer, none of it is technical. And one of the things I put into almost every single email is I need all of you to remember that your coaches think in the future.
Yeah.
You as 18 to 22-year-olds are very now focused.
Yeah.
And so I run into this in the technical aspects where people are wondering like, well, why am I think Bob, like you and I chatted on this last year a little bit. Why would I be doing in-place jumps right now. We have a meet in 2 months. I need to have an approach, a takeoff,
Yeah, right.
flight,
Yeah.
um, and all by that day where I'm like, well, no, no, you actually don't. I
Mm,
need you to have it at our conference championship,
yeah.
which is
Right.
much further
Yeah.
down the road.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm looking at you now and saying like, oh, here's a problem we need to address that's going to be a bigger problem in 2 months.
Yeah.
And I say this to the team all the time is we are thinking in the future. So when you say I need to be doing X, Y, Z, if you're not, one, it's really important you communicate and talk to us about it. Two,
Yeah.
just remember, like I've said this more this year than I've ever said it in my life to an athlete. I have had to tell almost every athlete, I'm on your team. Like,
Yeah.
remember, like you and
Man.
me we're tied to this.
Man. Yeah.
And I'm
Yeah.
on your team here. And so much of it has just been like you have something technical and I want you to be as successful as you want to be successful. And I hope not more, but sometimes more.
Yeah.
But more importantly, I want you to be safe and I want you to be healthy.
Yeah.
I think my guy Ricky, who, is probably my one of my best stories of a jumper. Um, the guy's been just hamstring bitten. He's had this problem, and we're like, yeah, we are taking our time on moving forward, and as much as he wants to do the next thing, he's good at listening and me saying when he hears me when I say, yeah, we have a technical flaw it's gonna knock you out for 6 weeks if we don't address this. So let's address it. And he's like,
Yeah.
cool. So I'm like, so you're gonna take 10 centimeters off your jump for a minute, and then we'll get back to it with an extra 20.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah, it's an astounding battle, and I was amazed how many kids I had to remind, like, we
Yeah.
wear the same colors, like
Yeah. I'm here to help you. I'm not
yeah,
trying to ruin you. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
And I think like maybe this is my last point. I think I probably got to go. I got
yeah,
about or maybe 5 minutes, 5-10 minutes if we got another question. But on that, yeah, kind of piggybacking off what you said there, Dave, and then in this question we've been tackling about long-term development. But um, I think a lot of times kids are afraid to confront a coach and give their opinion,
Yeah.
or criticism. But I like and so I always like have to tell a lot of time I tell the kids like, hey, if you don't like something we're doing, like just tell me. We can have a conversation and that's okay. Like I'll make the change. Or
yeah,
maybe I'll give you the reason why we're doing what we're doing and it'll help you understand, and so yeah, I think like because I think a lot of times maybe kids are afraid to create a conflict. And so
yeah,
they just kind of keep it inside it, but eventually it's going to come out in some way. And so I think that communication or learning to communicate and even and I've said this to a couple of kids this year, especially like sometimes you have to have hard conversations.
yeah,
And that's part of life,
yeah,
like whether you do that to me as your coach or I do that to you as my athlete, that's life. You
yeah,
got to do hard things in life, and sometimes you have to have very uncomfortable conversations. And that's being an adult. And but not doing that's even worse. You're just running away because you don't want to have a confrontation. When in reality, it probably wouldn't even be a confrontation to begin with. It'd just be a normal conversation. And
yeah,
so I think like getting kids to not seek comfort and to be willing to express genuine honesty and concern. That I think that's another thing that maybe us coaches of the youthful generation, like we have to actively like try to pull that out of them.
yeah,
I'd rather I told one kid this year where it just wasn't going well, and Dave, you probably know exactly who I'm talking about, but I'm
yeah,
not gonna
yeah,
say it. But I told one kid this year, like, you know what? I would rather there was a point where it just wasn't going well for a long time, and I couldn't get through to this person. But we had this one meeting one day, and I told this person, look, I would rather you cuss me out and tell me I suck as your coach than I'm a crap coach. I use much harsher language. Like I would rather you say that to me rather than just not say anything. Like I don't know what I'm trying to figure out a solution here, and I can't figure it out because like you're not like I can't get anything out of you. Like, and so I don't know where to go. I'm lost right now. We
Yeah.
have to work together, and so I do think that communication piece, and this person, thankfully, it did work. And then this person opened up entirely, and it was amazing, and went on to having an unbelievable season at the end of the by the end of the year, and
Yeah.
super excited moving forward. But yeah, I think that willingness to communicate and open up and have genuine and maybe hard conversations, and that's okay. Like it doesn't have to be dandelions and roses all the time, And so I think that's another, key fundamental piece. But I think I'm out of time here, guys. So
Yeah.
any other nuggets or questions here?
I mean, there's another
Yeah.
3 hour
Can we
conversation.
do it again?
Yeah, yeah, we'll do it next week if you want to.
Yeah,
Ever, yeah.
Dude. Oh,
because we could
Bob, you're
talk
making
like
my
crazy.
day.
I think the idea, I'm very interested. I think that would be really cool to talk about is all the stuff you did at Loyola with no track that could apply to high school coaches, new high school coaches that don't have facilities. So
All over that one.
Right? That would be
Oh, yeah.
because
Yeah.
like just talking about what can you do without a facility and
Yeah.
how awesome can you still be would be
I'm all about that. I'm the king of that question. Yeah,
Okay.
I'm all about it. Yeah, I love that idea.
Let's do that. And then Bob, I want to understand the overlap of the Venn diagram of your weight room at all 3 locations. Like where do you,
What do you mean?
so Loyola,
Oh,
strength and conditioning,
okay.
New
I see.
Mexico, strength
Okay.
and conditioning,
Yeah.
Louisville.
Sure.
What's the overlap look like?
and where
Yeah.
do bicep curls fit into all of this? Like how much of an emphasis are bicep curls? Like 95%, or are you more of a traps guy?
You haven't changed one bit since I coached you like 42 years ago.
Everybody knows biceps don't matter without the tries. You got to get the
Exactly.
wishbone.
Listen, Mike and I were like, if you can't have the biggest jump, we definitely gonna have the biggest biceps on the run.
That's a fair
You gotta
point.
win something, right?
Yeah.
Awesome.
Well, Bob, this is awesome. I really appreciate your time.
Yeah,
This
yeah,
was really
yeah.
great.
Thanks for having me on, guys. I like what you guys are doing. I'm feeling it.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Well, let's type up some notes. I'll type up some notes on this, and then let's maybe see if we can connect again. And I mean, I think Bob, I know you love case studies. I have a couple I would love to dig into with you.
sure. Let's do it. Yeah.
Cool.
All right, gentlemen.
All right, guys.
All right. It was a pleasure.
Thank you, guys.
Always.
Have
All
a
right,
great
we'll see
night.
you guys. See ya.